Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Mavericks Marketing Masterclass. This is the second of 9 episodes in season 2, sponsored by the ACA and MASA. And if you don't know about those two organizations, please do look them up, marketingsa.co.za and the aca.co.za. acasa.co.za, I apologize. My name is David, and I'm joined by my colleague Khaya Dlanga. And we're really happy to have you on this webinar. And we've got two very special guests to introduce today. Firstly, a returning guest from season 1, Sharon Keith. Hello, Sharon. Sharon is a leadership coach and consultant, but has an incredibly distinguished career as a marketing leader at some of the world's top companies, namely Heineken, Standard Bank, the Coca-Cola Company, Diageo, and Unilever, with some of these being global roles out of the US and Ireland. Sharon qualified with a BCom from the University of KZN, go KZN, and an MBA from UCT, GSB, and is a certified IOD director, as well as achieving, I think, soon, Sharon, your accreditation in ICF leadership by the Center for Coaching at the GSB in Cape Town. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. And I haven't qualified yet. Hopefully next month I'll get that.
Hopefully next month. Okay, fingers crossed.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Thank you, Sharon. Next is Suhana Gordon. Suhana is currently Chief Creative Officer at Lovesong and founder of OpenChair. We're going to ask you a little bit more about that later, Suhana. Suhana is also a graduate of the University of KZN. Look at that. And also the AAA, and her previous experience includes Chief Creative Officer at Duke, Exec Creative Director at FCB, Creative Director at Network BBDO, VML, and Black River Football Club, or FC, and then copywriting roles at King James and Ogilvy. Quite a distinguished career in the stars of the advertising industry. Suhana worked with both Sharon and Khaya on campaigns for Coca-Cola, and is also responsible for the globally awarded and Lurie Grand Prix work for Nando's called The Last Dictator Standing. Those were the days, weren't they, Suhana? She's also been a judge at Cannes, The One Show, Clio's, and a former chairperson of the Luries, currently on the exco of the Creative Circle. Welcome, Suhana. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Excellent. What a distinguished panel of guests we have. And obviously I have my colleague Khaya with me as well, who has extensive experience both on the agency and the client side. So a really good mix of people with varied careers on this webinar. And we're very grateful to our guests, by the way, for their service to the industry and for giving up their time, which they do freely in these sessions. And I'd like to get right to it just by kind of, asking the guests a particular question. If you have any questions of the guests, by the way, if you're on the webinar and you'd like to pop those in the chat, please do that as we're talking and having a conversation, and we'll read those back to the guests as we go. So I don't know about any of you, when you did your degrees at KZN or your postgraduate qualifications post that, but I never knew what I wanted to do when I left school. It was everything from a kind of a pharmacist to a journalist. That's quite a very different, in different set of interests. And so I did what lots of people do. I think is I went for the safety net BCom and then try to figure it out from there. And I landed up doing something on consumer behavior, which fascinated me to no end. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about where that might lead me, and I landed up specializing in marketing and have worked in that career ever since on both the client and the agency side. So let me start by just asking you, Sharon, were you the same as me? I mean, what led you to marketing as a profession in the first place? Did you know what you wanted to do when you went to university, and when you graduated? How did you get into your first role? I mean, that's a 3-part question, but
okay.
Let's hear your story.
So yeah, a little bit like you, I had absolutely no idea, and back in the day, we had zero aptitude testing, career guidance. You sort of looked at your parents and you went, I don't want to do what they do necessarily. And you looked at your teachers and you're like, I definitely don't want to do that. I got to registration day at UKZN and went, oh, okay, the BSc looks quite hard. And I don't think I really want to do a BA. And so what's this? Oh, a BCom. Okay. Oh, that looks interesting. Anyway, I phoned my parents at night and I said, Dad, I've registered for a BCom. And he went, oh my God. He said, that's going to be very difficult. And I was like, where's your faith? Anyway, but so I didn't really have a clue. I'm not sure that I still know what I want to do when I grow up. But I had a fascination with human behavior and why people do what they do and how you might be able to influence that. And so I kind of fell into marketing. To be fair, and I know a lot of the people listening are at that point in their lives where they've done a bit of study, they've maybe done a little bit of work, and they are now trying to get their first proper job. And it's really tough. Certainly when I graduated, it was really tough. And I went through that immense frustration of applying and applying and applying to lots of different companies, sending my CV in, getting either crickets back or the dreaded sorry letter. Well, you know, we're really looking for people with experience. And you're like, well, you know, how do I get experience if no one will give me a job? Yeah. So, and I don't know that this would work today. And so perhaps don't try this at home. But in desperation, I was living in a digs with 7 people in Durban. And some of them were working at Unilever. And I thought, well, Unilever's quite a good place to try. They'd already rejected me a couple of times in writing, right. But I just showed up. I went in the door. I found my way to the HR department, which was quite easy to do, and I blagged my way into an interview.
Okay.
I mean, you wouldn't get past security at the parking lot these days, but 7 interviews later, I made it into the graduate program through the back door. And then that was the answer to that. But and the twist in the tail is Unilever doesn't really care what you've studied. They put people all over the place. And so I ended up in HR for the first 5 years of my career. Yeah, exactly.
What?
And
I didn't know this.
It was a very grown-up sort of thing to do. But I kept looking at my marketing colleagues over there that looked like they were having much more fun. And eventually, I'm going to get across, but that's another story. So, you know, I think my message would be trust yourself, and knock on every door and keep knocking, and you know, really, 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 because sometimes no is just the first step to a yes.
Yeah, lovely story of resilience, Sharon, and pressing on. Hey, geez, I'm sure there is going to be a long line outside Unilever tomorrow.
Yeah. Nowadays they're out sticks.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, Anna, how about you? How did you get into your profession, and tell us the story, the background to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just love that we're all UKZN alumni. My parents, you know, we grew up in the apartheid years, and for my parents, the career options were limited. It was doctor, lawyer, teacher. And my father and mother saw that I had a great love for performance. We used to put on impromptu shows in our lounge for whichever visitors were willing to hear us out. And we had this, my siblings and I had this passion for theater, I suppose. And so when it came time to study and get into university, I said to my dad and mom, I want to major in drama and go, you know, be in the theater world. And I love that my father was extremely excited because it was an opportunity that they never had, you know, to venture into that kind of field. So they were very supportive, both parents. And I went on to study at UKZN. I majored in drama and English. And it was absolutely the best years of my life, dancing, putting on theater shows. I spent a lot of time in that world. And then I reached my honors year, and it was, you know, getting a bit quite serious. And I started to think about how I would earn a living in the arts in South Africa. And because you realize it's actually quite a challenge. And I got a little bit scared, to be honest, about how to pursue and to not be a worry to my parents. And at the time, my brother was venturing into he finished matric and he was venturing into advertising, and like actually quite like brazen and not really thinking of my parents. I went, can I also do that? Never mind that they've just paid for a whole university career. I said, can I also go to AAA? And they were like, yes, of course. And so I did a 1 year postgrad in copywriting, and I loved it because also English was one of my majors, and it was still a creative, that was what was important to me, that it was still a creative industry. And then I got my first internship at Ogilvy, which, like Unilever is a university of advertising, and I think so is Ogilvy. And I started there as an
Yes.
intern, and I remember being at the staff party at the end of the year and thinking, I have to get this job. And I remember begging my bosses at the time, I'm like, will you hire me? Will you hire me? And they're all they're interested in is in the party, not this intern begging to be hired. And the start of the new year, I went off to Saigon restaurant to get a job as a waitress because I just kept thinking I'm not going to get hired. And I did get hired, which was to much relief. Yeah, and then I started at Ogilvy, back in the day.
Fantastic. And you started as a writer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, still a
Okay, so
writer.
you and Khaya are both writers in the advertising world. So I mentioned earlier that you're the founder of OpenChair. I mean, thank you for sharing your kind of entry story into the industry, but tell us a little bit about that, because that's emerged, while you were in the industry. But I've got my understanding of what OpenChair is. It's a community for young women in the advertising industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? But my understanding of it leads me to believe that maybe the industry didn't quite live up to the expectations you had of it, and hence you started this initiative.
Yeah, so what I didn't complete saying is that Ogilvy was definitely a university, but it was at a time when the industry wasn't transformed at all, and I was
Okay.
one of very few women of color. In fact, I think there was one other that joined at the same time as me. And I didn't have a good experience. It was a boys' locker room of advertising. I do believe it's changed a lot since then, but I was terrified. I spent a lot of time being very intimidated by this world that I was in, where women weren't treated really well. And so I ran away from advertising. I actually called my parents and said, can I come back home and dance again? So I
Yeah.
actually went back, and it my thanked my parents for just going, yes, come home. So I did leave, but the point was that there weren't enough women leaders, or there wasn't enough connection between women in the industry. So you kind of dumped in this world, and it was old school. It was, why are you working on Audi? You should be working on tampon ads. And this was the year 2000,
Wow.
2001. So it wasn't that long ago, right? And so I felt like it kicked me out of the industry. And I came back a few years later, and it had changed a little, but still not the way it should be. And I had an amazing opportunity to be the chairperson of the Luries. And at that point, someone said to me, use the platform really well. You've got a platform, use it. I thought I was being put there just because I'm a woman of color. And when I got given that advice, it was the best advice. It was, who cares? Use it and do
Brilliant.
it so well that no one ever asks why you were there in the first place. So OpenShare actually started then because for me, it was personal. It was, I wanted to see more women coming up on stage to collect awards. I wanted to see more women connected and more women making it into leadership roles. And then we ran it for a few years, myself, Simone Bosman, and Jenny Glover. And then it kind of died during COVID. And a year ago, we started it again with 5 other women in the industry. It's Melina McDonald, Lorraine Smith, Fran Lucken, Roanna Williams, and Khabiseng Matau, all really, really senior, powerful women. And we revived it with the same objective around creating connections for women in the industry, because we
Yes.
believe it's not a situation where there aren't enough women. It's that they're not
Yes.
progressing to the senior roles. And there's various reasons for that. And one of them being the lack of connection and a space to be inspired. and the other one around safety in the industry, around bad
Yes.
behavior that makes women check out. So that's the purpose of Open Chain. It's not only for young women, it's actually for all women, because the mentors learn as much as the mentees. It's very
Yeah,
close.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
What a brilliant initiative. Well played on putting that back together again. I'm glad it's running. You've recently, something came out of that, though. I mean, you took quite a lot of young people to Cannes. Is that correct?
Yes,
Young women to Cannes?
Late last year, we saw that Cannes had introduced a thing called the ERA program, Equity, Representation, and Accessibility. And anyone with a nonprofit that focuses on DE&I initiatives could apply. So I did, and I remember saying to the board, this is a long shot, guys. I don't know if we're going to get it. And we got a whole 16, 17 passes to Cannes, which was just, it was mind-blowing. It was quite a big moment for OpenShare, because we managed
Amazing.
with the help of the industry to take these women. It was, I think, a historic moment, because I don't think that many women have been in the history of South Africa to Cannes. Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Really
Absolutely
well
brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, really well done. Thank you for sharing that story, and particularly the very personal bits of it, Siona. That's great. Shona, can I ask you, if I can just turn the conversation back to you? Was your initial experience in the industry, did that live up to your expectations? Or, I mean, you kind of described that you went into HR and then looked at the marketing people, they were having more fun. You went over there. When you got into marketing, did you kind of know what you were getting into, or did you just learn the ropes as you went? How did that evolve for you?
I think let me start by saying the world of work was a rude shock.
Right.
I think things have got a lot better now. As a female, there were loads of things that you were like, nobody ever told me that this was going to happen. Where I don't want to get all sort of maudlin about it, but some truly horrifying experiences, and things that made you really question whether you wanted to stay in a commercial environment. Having grown up as a bit of a tomboy, I'd sort of just like motor through, but it really is quite tough for young people. Marketing, and to be fair, those early years in HR, I think, gave me some real understanding of managing people, and some very good grounding in terms of interpersonal relationships, into principles and values and things that are important to manage well in the workplace.
Yes.
Unilever were amazing. I had kept flagging through my performance reviews and things that I wanted to try marketing. And eventually I think the people stuff was weighing me down, because there was a huge amount of, in those days, the only form of political expression for people of color was the trade union movement. And so I was handling an enormous amount of unrest being played out in the workplace, whether it was boycotts or stayaways or strikes or things. And it was heavy, for somebody who was at that stage, I think I was 22 or 23. Then Unilever, my bosses said, look, let's give it a go. And what they did very, very helpfully was they moved me across laterally at my level. But they put me through all the sort of baby classes, the beginner stuff on, marketing 101, on an accelerated basis, but I was still having to deliver on my brands and my brand plans and my everything else. So it was an accelerated learning experience, but very well supported. And that was the benefit of a company like Unilever that invests in training. So
Yes.
that, you know, then you start to figure it out. I think there was some value also in I think having not grown up in marketing, because I asked a lot of quite naive questions, like, has anybody asked the consumer if she wants this? Or,
Yeah.
you know, why are we doing this? And because I was kind of fresh off the boat in some ways, I could ask those sorts of questions, stupid questions, and get away with it, because people were like, oh, shame, you know, she doesn't really know. Let's help her. But often there were other people with the same questions in their heads, but not wanting to show that they didn't know those things.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
what's an
I mean,
AR, whatever.
yes, yes. What's an AR? Absolutely. So, I mean, it's a pity that more organizations don't do more of that kind of foundational work in the marketing, because, you know, Unilever is very marketing led as an organization, but many other organizations don't do enough of that kind of embedding the principles of marketing into young people when they're first entering the industry. Is that fair to say, Sharon?
Yes, I think so. And look, different companies have different pipelines in terms of how they bring new talent into the organization. Yes. Unilever likes to take people who are, you know, they've got a bit of academics behind them maybe, but they're still quite unformed, and then they shape them and put them through a competitive process, and they end up with kind of the people who fit from a chemistry point of view and a values point of view.
Yes. Yes.
They lose, I think, 50% of their graduates in the first 3 years,
for
one reason or another. But that's their system, and they tend to promote from within rather than hire in from the outside. Other companies, a Coca-Cola, for example, sometimes takes interns in, but quite often wants people with 3 or 4 years experience, working experience, and they will often kind of mix up the gene pool, if you like, by bringing people in from different industries, because they will bring different frameworks and different perspectives into the Coca-Cola system. So I think it's very much, what is your company philosophy? My personal sense is that everybody should be doing something to grow the capability of the people inside their business. You can't just expect people to show up fully formed. It doesn't really work that way.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to ask Khaya to step in here, but just as a way of introducing him to this conversation and hearing his story and his voice, you know, we know the marketing profession requires both a left and a right brain, and sometimes, just to use an analogy, you have to be a banded pack, right? Like, you have to be both in some circumstances. But Khaya's a bit like that, actually. I mean, he's a writer, he's a marketer, he's a copywriter, an author, you know, all sorts of things. I've even seen him on the front of a CD cover, actually. And if any of you want to know which one that is, you can let me know. I'll send it for you. I'll send it to you as a link for further embarrassing moments. No, it's okay. Yeah. Well, let's let Khaya talk about the left brain, right brain thing, and maybe a little bit of his story.
Okay. Yeah, don't look that song up. So I'm also like, I do realize that I'm surrounded by everyone here is from KZN, and I want to say that I'm representing the Eastern Cape. So yeah, Eastern Cape. So the first time I actually heard anything about marketing and advertising, there was a subject back in my day called business economics. And so I couldn't do math. I didn't do math, so that's what I did, or accounting. So that's what I did. And there was like a chapter that focused on marketing. And it's like, wow, this was very interesting. And I got very good marks, I think, every time we did a new subject. And I was like, this is natural.
This was at school?
This is at school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this is like in standard 8. And it's grade 10 now. And then one day that a lady who had come from the AAA to kind of tell us about advertising, and she was in this class and she was telling like a whole bunch of us about, this advertising, if you want to go into a career in advertising. And I got me like little East London, And I remember her showing us this work, these ads that were done by people who were probably 3 or 4 years older than me. And I was like, that is so cool. I'd love to do that. In fact, I think I can do that. And then that's when, I managed to get myself, to get into the AAA. I'm not going to talk about how I got into the AAA, but it was by crook and hook.
Don't worry, we've all been
there. So I got into the AAA, and I studied art direction when I was there. But then, unfortunately, because as this story of so many South Africans, I had to drop out during my second year because a AAA is extremely expensive, and I began to work as I actually became homeless, and I got a job, and I worked as a waiter, and I remember there's this guy I worked with, Warren. He was a qualified engineer, and he was a 26. He was a waiter like I was, but Warren complained every day. And I remember one day saying, you know what? If I get to work today and Warren complains, I'm actually going to apply for a job in advertising. And so I got to work as a waiter, and Warren complained. I was like, okay, that's it, I'm done. So I went, I wrote like a CV because I was like, wow, you're a qualified engineer and so on. Like, just apply for a job, right? So anyway, I decided to write this application form, but my form, I made sure that it stood out because one, I dropped out. Number two, I'm in Cape Town, and I'm a person of color. I was like, I need to find a way to stand out here. And I applied, at low bull covered pace at the time. And, some people kind of like are aware of like my CV now because a few people have read it, but I'll say it again. And I did the standard thing, and I wrote in bullet point form that like, because I lived in Pioneers at the time, I was like, the first bullet point was like, I can use phones, faxes, and computers without breaking them. My second bullet point was, I live in Pioneers, not Guguletu. Third bullet point was, some of my best friends are white. Another one was like, I am not a member of Kosatu. And then I wrote a headline, and the heading was position applying for, and it said copywriter. And then another heading, experience in this field. And then I used to write slogans on township walls like Free Mandela and One Man, One Vote. This was a very successful campaign, as you might have noticed. And I got a phone call, and I literally got a phone call like that very day, for an interview. And then even though I was an art director and they saw my writing skills, and then I was hired as a copywriter because one of the guys that spoke to me said that he told me that actually, I think you should probably become a copywriter, but you can become an art director if you want. He said copywriters earn more money than art directors, and they don't spend as much time at the office. And I said, okay, I'm going to do
Easy
that.
choice. Yeah.
What lies?
What lies, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for sharing that story, Khaya, and also the personal parts of that story. Suana, what do you think are the most fundamental skills needed to build a strong career in the advertising or communications or marketing profession?
Yeah, Khaya, I love that story because it's just the creativity that went into your application. It shows passion, it shows that, you have that ability to stand out, and I think that is one thing. But for me, what I've realized over time is that talent is really important, but it's not the only thing. Like I feel like I'm a hard worker, and part of the reason I got somewhere is through hard work more than even the talent, because talent sometimes can get you so far, but people, when you're in leadership, I think what you look for is people that will never let you down. You look for someone that's going to show up, that's going to deliver, that has a sense of resilience, which I think actually gets you really far in this industry. And especially in South Africa, because we have so many curveballs thrown at us all the time. So I would say that ability to show up and have resilience and be a hard worker And then what Khaya described in his application is a fresh take on things, an ability to see the world in a different way, because that's ultimately creativity, is how you can, adjust your lens and have a new, perspective on anything. So it's the passion and the curiosity and hunger. Like, I always feel the people that stand out are those people, that they don't get knocked down by when their work is bombed or anything. They have that, like, what's next ability, the ability to get up again and have the hunger for whatever ideas might come again. So yeah, I think those are the qualities that I've seen time and time again, get people very far.
Yeah, that's lovely. And to reiterate, I mean, your story was very, very touching, actually, but full of little inserts of your own character, which is wonderful to see. Maybe read the question we have from one of the participants on the chat, which is quite interesting because it brings up the artificial intelligence as a question to a writer. So I don't know, Khaya, do you want to shoot with that one?
Yeah. So this question is from Piwet. It says, in the context of AI, is it worth studying copywriting or anything that requires the creative use of your brain? And then in brackets, my friend has written a whole book using AI. I'll answer first.
Yeah, we're expecting you to.
Okay, so I'd say that for me, in the context, I think maybe in time, I just don't know. I just feel that part of AI doesn't have that part of like a human insight, the context and background and cultural nuances that take place. And I feel that with AI will miss those little nuances that will add an additional layer to something that is profoundly meaningful. For example, like if I were to ask, go to an AI, and the AI would not have written the CV that I wrote. Yeah. Right? Because it doesn't have that context where I'll talk about the fact that, okay, well, some of my, I can use phones, faxes, and computers without breaking them, or I'm not a member of COSATU, and that there is these very small things that have a profound and big impact. And I think what AI can do, it can take a general sense of what the world is and what it feels, and it feels right, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I feel like what it will do is that it will leave it in the average and in the average model, but not in the exceptionalism of human creativity. Yeah, that's how I feel about AI. Yeah. So it's worth studying.
I wanted to ask if the book was written in Xhosa or Zulu or Sotho.
AI. That's a good one. Yes, exactly.
And for me, it's like, I don't see AI as an enemy at all. I think it's really helpful. If you can treat it as an ally, it's really helpful across any industry, I suppose. But in a creative industry, I think what Khaya is saying is absolutely right. There's a nuance and a thing. I think lived experience is the thing that AI doesn't have. So you can always teach it, but you can't teach it every memory you have. You can't teach it the memory you had of growing up in Clare Estate, Durban, in the middle of apartheid, and putting on a show. I can't teach that to an AI bot, but I can maybe over time try to give it a sense of it. And I think in the future, we're going to start having stamps of distinction that say made by humans. Because I feel like that particular characteristic of our race is that you can't take away the humanness of who we are. And so we will advance and advance as we have done for centuries, but we'll never be able to take away that special thing, that intangible quality that humans have. And so I'm going to hold on to that. So yes, it might write a book, but can it write the same book that Khaya wrote with the same, the same stories? I don't think it's going to be that deep.
No, I agree with you. And I think that, if I may, there are loads of places where AI is incredibly useful. I've said this to David before. I used it to write a whole marketing department's worth of job descriptions a few years ago because I'd actually rather stick needles in my eyes than do that, from scratch. But that's how, I feel quite strongly about that. But but wrote stuff like that, where it can go and search the whole internet and find the best and aggregate it and give you something that's very clear. Fantastic. But if you want pathos, if you want empathy, if you want to move somebody, if you want to make them feel something, AI can't describe the smell of the red polish that was on our front veranda when I was growing up. It can't do that. It can't. There are things where only a human can connect with another human. I want to go one step further on this AI thing, and that's, I have a couple of nephews who are in their 20s who are currently applying for different jobs, and they're incredibly frustrated because you have to send your CV and your application into a portal, and then there's an AI bot screening these things. And so if you don't have the right keywords in, or whatever they're looking for, you don't get through to the CVs that make it into a human. And so you've got to think about, well, how do I game the system? You shouldn't have to do that. But secondly, to reference what Khaya was saying, how do you stand out in that kind of an environment? How do you make sure that you say something quirky or interesting or meaningful that somebody's going to say, I want to meet that person because they sound really interesting.
Yes.
And that's how to get through those almost impossible filters.
Yeah.
On an adjunct subject, thank you, Sharon, for that. On an adjunct subject, question from Ntando. They ask, across the varied industries you've worked in, what has been your guiding Bible in understanding consumer and human behavior across varied industries? That's to both of you. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting question because, we need to understand other people first before we can, I guess, be better people, in our marketing professions. What's your view on what guides you in understanding people and their behavior?
So I think Sue, you mentioned it earlier, but curiosity, number one. Number two, don't assume that your target market is like you in any way whatsoever. And go into it with an open heart, with an open mind, to go, what do people do? And I'm going to reference Unilever again, because that was the very beginning of my marketing journey. And Unilever is absolutely insistent that you, you get out from behind your desk and you go. And if your brand is a washing powder brand, you go out and you wash clothes and linen and stuff with your consumers over and over and over and over again. You see why they do what they do. And what they use on the collars and cuffs versus what they use on cuffs and other parts of the garments. The same with cooking, the same with shopping, the same with any of these things. You go and you understand how they do what they do. And you can't do that just by watching. You've actually got to immerse yourself. When Khaya and I were at Coca-Cola and we were doing some work on Coke and meals, and I think, Sue, you were working with us at the same time. We got this fairly anodyne set of marketing materials, ads and whatnot, that had been developed in Spain. And when we showed them to our consumers, they were like, what is that even food? What is that? Like, they got completely I think it was paella or something, and they were like, what is that?
Yes,
And the people were sitting kind of in a courtyard on a long table, and the whole extended family was there. We discovered that certainly in Soweto and the townships around Johannesburg, nobody uses their dining room table unless it's a very important meeting. Nobody eats there. Why do we continue to show ads with this happy family sitting around a dining room table? They were like, no, everybody eats together, often or on communal plates. And here's how it works. And in fact, mom's biggest problem is not getting the family together. Her problem is she doesn't know how many people are going to show up for a meal. And so by really getting under the skin, you then can produce work that people go, they see me, they know me.
Okay.
And this is exactly my life. And so, yeah, so it doesn't matter what the context is, what the category is. Go and understand, why are people in it, and how are they making their decisions, and what are they doing? Sorry, I've
Yes.
kind of gone a bit.
No, great. I mean, I'll ask Suana on a link question. How much Nando's did you eat when you were making The Last Dictator? Was it a lot?
You will not believe this. I'm a vegetarian, so I've
Oh,
never
no.
had meat my whole life, but I've worked on
You ate
writing
the
the little
wedges.
copy. I ate the wedges. Would go to tastings and I'd sit with a pen and paper and ask my colleagues, I'm like, so how did that taste? Explain everything to me. And really,
Okay.
so yeah, you don't have to necessarily taste the chicken to believe it's good chicken when you see other people's reaction. But yeah, that's it. But I just want to add on to what Sharon said about the audiences, and very important, I think, is also not making what she said about not making assumptions, and also not patronizing your audience. I feel like we do that a lot in South Africa. I've been told many times, no, our target market is not a high earning target market. You can't put that in front of them as an aspirational dream. And what I've learned is that humans are human. So you can dream, you can still dream no matter where you are, and you can always aspire to be bigger and better. So for me, that's one of the biggest things I've learned in advertising. And also, like, you can't, like, I remember listening to research of a young woman who lived in an informal settlement, who had the DSTV premium. And she had that because it was more important for her to not miss out, and to be able, she would do two jobs just so that she could afford the premium package. And so never making any assumptions. And I think that also we're so obsessed about what the earning capacity is, where you live, the geography, the demographics, but it's also about how humans behave. And Sharon can speak a lot to this around your need state at a certain point. Why would I suddenly want to cut my hair? Maybe because I've had a breakup and I want to turn into, someone else for a moment. But so understanding what motivates people at different points, so that you might act out of character and be part of an audience for that moment. So I think it's very interesting, and getting into human insight and human understanding is probably the biggest thing we can. Yeah.
Lovely. Great answer.
Yeah.
Khaya, you have another question from the chat?
Yeah, so I have a question from Ami. What advice can you give to a 21-year-old coming into the industry for the first time with no prior experience?
Who wants to start? Sue, you start. I started last time.
So I'm assuming they mean I'm going to speak as if they're entering the creative side of the industry. I would say, like, it's a cliche, but really be like a sponge, to be open and to learn as much, because the universities or the ad schools are not going to teach you everything. They're going to teach you the skills and the curriculum, but when you walk, as Sharon said, when you walk into the world of work, it is completely different. So I would say learn from those around you. Spend a lot of time talking to people, because it can be intimidating, but I think that's something I wish I had done more of, is to speak to my seniors, get their experience. So it's being open to criticism, because you will face this every single day in a creative space. It's the hardest thing, that your creativity is torn apart every day and you have to start again and start again. So I would say that the ability to receive criticism, and to have fun, because I think you can't be in this creative industry without having fun. And it shows when you're making the best work. And I know Sharon and Khaya will attest to this, is when you're making the work that fires you up, is when that work really does well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Suana. Thank you. A question from Shaman, and I'm going to ask this one to Sharon, because It's about FMCG in particular, and the question is: I'm a marketer with 20 years experience in B2B, retail, and tourism. What advice would you give me for breaking into FMCG when they only value classical FMCG experience?
Yeah, sometimes I think you've got to try and get past some of those rigid, binary type. I want this, but I don't want that.
Yes.
I've had a lot of FMCG marketing experience. I've had a little bit of B2B marketing experience. And you know what? Even if you are marketing to a business from another business, you are actually not marketing to a company, you're marketing to people. It's the people in those businesses that you are connecting with. And so the skills are actually very similar. Some of the tools are different, and some of the channels that you use are different. But I would say that the first thing to do is to try and get in front of somebody, because there's so much value in being able to show where have you found a human insight. Where have you been able to understand the DNA of a brand and build that? Because again, it doesn't matter if it's a packaged good or if it's a service or it's something for a business to business thing. And I think putting it into these tiny little boxes, I think restricts the kind of magic that you could create. So you really want to get in front of somebody and have a proper conversation around what have you done? What have you done that's really kind of built a brand, connected with your customers and been able to drive growth? Because the marketing principles are very, very similar.
Yes. And it talks to the point that Suhana made earlier, that, she's a vegetarian that worked on Nando's, but credited an award-winning ad because she listened and understood and appreciated what the product is all about. But also she works on, insurance companies, Coca-Cola, Netflix. She worked on all of those kind of categories, which as a creative, you have to port yourself, don't you, Suhana? Maybe talk a little bit about the way Sharon's described that on the client side. That's the same capability, right? You've got to put yourself into a different mode. Is that fair to say?
I think so. And I think it's for those coming into the industry, it's what makes our job so exciting, is that you're not always stuck in the same lane. One day you're selling chicken and the next you're selling luxury goods or something like that. So for me, that's what makes it exciting. And you have to start knowing enough about all those categories, which is also in education. Like right now, I work with an investment company, and I've had to learn so much because it's the knowledge is so technical. But that's never a chore. I find that part really exciting. I will drive a Mini for the rest of my life, because when we were working on Mini, we got to test drive it. I couldn't afford to buy one then, and we had to wait my whole life to buy one. But the sheer experience of driving a Mini and learning about how it works, and then to understand what you're selling, I think makes that part of the business really fun. And so, yeah, I would say, I think I forgot the question, but I think it was around how to manage different categories. And I think that is part of it, is to treat it like a student, like you're there to learn, and then it's your job to sell it to people. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. In fact, Khaya, I think you got a point of view on that. Being a student forever is a really important, I guess, conversation we all need to have with ourselves. How do you stay in that mode?
That's very true. For me, I'll tell you what I did, for example, when I started, is I spent so much time as a creative, because I was so aware of the fact that I dropped out, that I watched every single can reel I could find. So to such an extent that when I was still a copywriter and still working, people in the agency would come to me and say, there's that ad and it's this and it does it. And I'd be like, actually, that got a silver in 2004 can reel. and people would go and find, and I was right. And so what that does is that it kind of builds your understanding of what are the patterns, what are the systems that people use to make great creative work, and not just the creative work. And I think it's important, I think, as a marketer, to literally just go and see what are the great case studies you can find, and just read them for fun, not because just because of your curiosity.
Yeah.
And now for me, for example, again, because I'm very much aware of the fact that like I don't have a degree, I haven't qualified. I've literally just I recently just applied to go to study at Henley because I'm very aware of the deficiency that I have. But I think that as a marketer, you should not be someone who feels that, okay, now I know enough. The day you feel like you know enough, just go and dig a grave and put yourself in there and bury yourself. Anyway, here's a question from Tembeka. What is your 5 to 10-year outlook for marketing? What is the contribution of the future of the marketer?
Sure. Okay, I'll have a go at that one, and I think some of the other panelists might have some thoughts, but I think marketing, for me, marketing works. Marketing very definitely can generate growth, profitable growth. You listen to people like Mark Ritson, you read some of these great texts on marketing, and you understand that it's not just the short-term promotional spend, it's also the long-term brand building spend, and that's what drives the goodwill of brands. I think the companies that think that they can win without marketing are fooling themselves, and they're on a very, very short treadmill, which means they're going to have to spend more and more on discounting and that kind of thing to get the sales they want, but they're not going to get meaningful, profitable growth and margin growth. So I think there's always going to be a need for marketing. However, I do think that marketing sometimes gets a bad rap because sometimes the rest of the business only sees the fun and the fluff and a lot of the marketers don't speak business. And so it's important that you learn the language of business and you understand the commercial realities of the business that you're in or the industry you're in, as well as the creative side of it. David, I think you said earlier on, it's the left brain and the right brain, but it's also understanding how does marketing fit with the other elements that make a business work. And so, I think there's a huge amount of marketing technology. I think there's a huge amount of AI. I think that the fragmentation of media, fragmentation of channels, all of that's going to make it potentially more complex. But our job is going to be how do we take that complexity and work with it, not fight with it. But I'm of the firm belief that marketing is here to stay, and all of us have an obligation to try and increase our capability and our skill sets, but also do some of our own PR properly so that people take us seriously, as seriously as they might take the finance department. Because otherwise we're not helping ourselves.
Thank you, Sharon. Very well said. So Anna, maybe I can ask you on the agency side of things when it comes to the future and building a career in that future state of where the industry is headed, which is in quite a state of flux at the moment. What would your advice be for someone coming into that industry?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll just speak on the brand side of it. I think I agree totally with Sharon around the fact that it's not just about performance marketing, it's also building the brand alongside. But I think what's also changed, and we can argue whether it's good or not, is the ownership of a brand is not just with a marketing team. Now we have the creator economy, we have consumers that are much more involved and engaged. And so your brand belongs to the fans to the haters to everybody, really. The brand is as human as we are. So I think the quicker we adapt to that, the better. And then from a creative perspective, I'll speak specifically about South Africa and South African creativity, because I've also just had the privilege of coming back from Cannes. And what I see with the winning nations is that the more steeped in culture the work is, the more steeped in local insights is, the better the work becomes. And we have the richest stories. We have the most crazy problems in our country. So I think that the more we lean into those things, the better. And I think we do it, but we're not going deep enough, because it's I can see it when I see the other, other regions like Brazil, whatever those regions are. So I feel like the creators coming into advertising, the more you lean into your stories, who you are as people, what your cultural background is, who we are as South Africans, I think those are the stories to be telling. And yeah, that's going to help us stand out.
Lovely, Sona. Thank you very, very much. All right. Unfortunately, I know I'm getting past some other questions from the chat, but we don't really have time to take another round of questions. So what I'm going to do is let's do a sum up quickly, if that's all right. Maybe as a wrap up, I would love to ask both of you, what one change, if you had the magic wand in your hand, would you like to see in the industry going forward, to kind of make it a better career? I think you've touched on some things, but perhaps just point out the one thing that you'd like to leave people with. And then just to say, in that wrap up, or maybe let me just ask you that first before we, if you can give me a short, sharp answer to that, for people to remember what that one thing might be, what would it be?
It's quite a tough question. Go ahead. You've got one. Now, if you've got an answer, I'm going to still think about it a bit.
There's so many, but I think I'll say it from a perspective of a leader. Like, treat your people well. People make this industry.
Lovely.
People, relationships. You can't be a good creative if you're not feeling good. Like, being a creative is very much linked to who we are as people, our feelings. So when we create safe spaces for people, the work just thrives. So yeah, be a good person, man.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, fantastic.
Be a good person. Absolutely. Lovely.
Yeah. I love that. I would say something a little different, and that's flippin' hell. Get out from behind your screens. Craig Irving from the Consumer Insights Agency has a wonderful saying, and he says, a desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world. So, I know we all love the convenience of working from home, and we are very good at managing our email and our, all of the stuff that happens on screens, whether it's our phones or our laptops, whatever. But get out into the real world. Get out into the real world and engage. Be visible. Ask questions. The human connection, I think, alongside the be a good person, is it's fundamental to this industry.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. And beautifully said as well. I want to thank you both again. A very heartfelt thanks for giving up your time so freely and for contributing to a great discussion. This is recorded. It will be posted on events.dailymaverick.co.za. And thank you to the audience for their attention and participation and questions. We look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully, you can come back to the next webinar. It's episode 3 on the 31st of July. That's with Gillian Wrightford and Carl Willoughby. And we're going to be talking then about nurturing creativity, and we look forward to seeing you there. But you can find out more about any of these events and webinars on events.dailymaverick.co.za. And thank you, everybody, for your participation and time, and have a happy rest of your week and Friday. Take care.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Bye.